Hey everybody, welcome. This is Beyond Range, and today we're going to be playing some defense in the big blind in single raise pots out of position. And we are starting off in the big blind versus the hijack. The board is ace queen 7. So this is a texture that is very strong for the in position player. So we're going to speak very big picture. I'm going to try to keep this concise, and we'll try to get through many hands. In position has equity advantage. In position has nut advantage, right? Our opponent raises hands like pocket queens, pocket aces, pocket sevens, ace queen, ace 7 suited, etc. While we will be 3-betting a fair amount of ace queen. We will be 3-betting a lot of pocket queens, all of our aces, and we'll be calling a lot of sevens. But the point is that our opponent is also having a pretty narrow range of about 20-22% here from this position. Now, we in the big blind may end up having a very similar amounts of hands, but again, we're 3-betting our top end stuff. And we might even be a little bit wider depending on his raise sizing and the rake. So the point is that our opponent's doing pretty good here. Now, we could go deeper into how you split, blah, 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 but I want to just kind of focus on the big picture stuff and then evaluate based on that. Now, our opponent says, hey, I'm going to check back. That means that his range is basically splitting, right? Now you can see that when he bets, his range is going to be more uncapped, but he also might have more air, you could say, right? So think about this big number line of 100%. Let me get a visual. Okay, I really need forgiveness from the viewers. Let me just take a minute and breathe, because this is going to look atrocious. My handwriting is absolutely terrible. But anyways, I think it's important for the video to get a visual, right? So we are like having a range like that. I can't even make a straight line, so don't trust anything I say about anything. I'm not an artist. Let's say we're at 1, and let's say we're at 0. And obviously this is not black and white, but let's say 1 equals the nuts, and let's say 0 equals the weakest hands, right? So when our opponent is betting his range, right, what's going to happen on this texture is you're going to see more hands like a queen check back. And you're going to see more hands like pocket kings, pocket tens check back. Meaning that this middling region is going to be more dense in the check range, right? But when our opponent is betting, it's more likely that he has this stuff and this stuff. Now, in No Limit, the way that this works, it's actually not as black and white. It's actually more like a little bit more of this and a little bit more of this, but then you're still mixing these in here. You get the point, right? But basically, your range, when you end up, let's say you face a bet and you go with the call, well, you would probably mostly raise your top end hands, okay? So meaning, and also you would probably end up folding your top end hands, okay? So your range that you continue with check call is mostly going to be in here, right? Now, our opponent goes with the check back. So we already said he probably has this region and not this and this. So what does that mean? Our range is completely uncapped. We have this whole thing, whereas our opponent is mostly going to have this thing. Now let's think about the consequences. Imagine if on the turn, we just check again with all these hands, this entire thing, right? We just check everything. Now our opponent's middling region doesn't really want to put that much money in, because now there are many reasons. I don't really want to go into the details about it. We can raise and we can polarize against. Blah, blah. The point is that if we have too many strong hands in our check range like this, well, then our opponent is not actually going to have very much incentive to bet himself. And if he checks too often, then we're not getting money with our good hands. But also, let's say if we decide to bet all of this, and then let's say we check. Let's say our checking range is only this now, okay? And let's say we bet some of the medium hands. So we did this weird squiggle to say, oh, we have like some of this. And actually, we're probably not going to bet the bottom end hands. We'll be betting some draws. And it's not always about equity. It's also like different equities have different meanings, because some equity can polarize. Some equity is just going to be stable. But again, we don't want to be too abstract. We want to be very, very simple in this episode. But the point is that basically when you end up going with, you have the option of the turn, and you can say, okay, well, my opponent has a bunch of ace 10. My opponent has a bunch of pocket 10s. My opponent has, a little bit of king jack, but not that much, because basically the 10 is a card where he improves so much with hands that already check that he doesn't really need to have so many nuts on a 10 in his check back range, because basically a lot of his king jack will end up betting the flop, blah, blah, blah. Now, this is a card where we also have a lot of stuff. Like, we have a lot of king jack, we have a lot of ace queen, we have a lot of pocket tens, we have queen 10, we have all this stuff, right? Now imagine that we end up never betting this. Well, our opponent's range, yeah, he's going to have this, and he's going to improve to some of this, but he's basically going to want to check this region, and he's going to want to bet this, and he's going to want to bet this. And you're going to say, oh yeah, he doesn't bet this. And guess what? That's not really good for our range. That's not really good for our range because our range is going to be, let's say, the whole thing. And our medium hands don't want him to just, polarize against us. Okay, I think maybe this is not like the greatest display, but the main point is that like you're sitting here and you're thinking, oh yeah, well, how good is my range compared to his, and how good is his range? Like, let's say if we think that we really improve on this card or we don't, that's going to change the frequency at which we bet our good hands. Because if he's going to reopen a lot, then we can just slow play our good hands because he's going to be the one that's putting money in. If he's not, then we need to be doing that. Now, when we end up, now we're not going to like bet a bunch of medium hands, of course, because that would just make no sense, right? If we're betting our medium hands, we're mostly getting him to fold weaker hands and continue better. And then when we check, our opponent is going to be able to bet. And then in order to make his hands indifferent, we're going to have to call down with even weaker stuff. Like, this is not an efficient strategy. So it's more efficient to bet our top end hands. Now, the question in our situation is not like anything other than how thin can we go. And then depending on how thin we can go, we can basically add more bluffs or add less bluffs depending on if we think he's over or under continuing. And it's not like clear on the turn. He might overcall the turn, but then he might overfold the river. And the pot gets exponentially bigger at that point. So even if he's underfolding the turn, but he's overfolding the river, then you might want to just, if you take a bluff, you might never want to bluff it on the turn, but then you definitely want to follow through on the river. And there's some weird math stuff about how you want to organize a range that way. It doesn't really matter. You see the big picture. You see the point is about your value threshold, right? So we're in this situation. We're basically going to be playing mostly check. Now, the value of ace-9, if you always check ace-9 here, your opponent is really, really middling heavy. He really does not improve that much stuff on the 10, relatively speaking. Okay, but anyways, the point is that we're going and we're getting in this situation. We're not going to go super detailed in this. We're just going to think about what makes sense at each point. Now, our opponent is betting and he's saying, hey, I have some hands that have equity, but maybe I don't have like a big nuts advantage, so I'm going to bet, right? So again, what is his... Oh, shit, I need to pull up this paint thing again because, well, I don't really need to. I think you can conceptualize that he's saying, hey, I have a hand that has a decent amount of equity against your range, but it's not... We're not going to go so big because maybe we don't have a nuts advantage or maybe we do, but then we still have decent equity and we can leverage some of our nuts, putting it in the small sizing to take more EV away from your kind of weaker hands. Let's say like you have a 7 here and he wants to bet something like a medium ace. And then occasionally he'll put in like pocket 10s to get you to like bluff raise, to do all sorts of like random stuff that makes it trickier for you to play. And it's not like because he wants you to, but it's just a higher way to make EV. Let's say you're going to be like raising hands that are medium. Let's say he uses this with a hand like King Jack occasionally, and then you can't just start raising like Ace-7 or Queen 10 because you put him on a small hand. There's all this equilibria stuff. So anyways, we're going with the call, and now on the river, our opponent, now who's going to have more King X? Now we're doing a lot of check call on the river with hands like basically King Queen, King 10, even King 7, and our opponent is mostly going to be checking his King X, right? He's not going to be reopening the turn with something like King 10. King Queen could be reopening, pocket kings could be reopening, Ace King could be, but the thing is a lot of his Ace King would be betting the flop. It's not like that efficient if he reopens the turn with too little equity. So who has the advantage on this card? You can see that you might want to have a leading range, but when we end up betting, this is kind of more deeper into theory, but your hand, when you check, actually has a decent amount of EV to show down, blah, blah, blah. It would be more efficient to try to turn another hand into a bluff, but then maybe you actually don't have that many bluffs because maybe you actually don't, like, it's not like you have a busted flush draw on the river, and maybe you end up having a hand like Queen 9, and then what are you going to do with it on the turn? Are you going to call? Are you going to fold? Like, do you have enough bluffs? So this is kind of how we're getting here, and we see like, oh, well, what's our best bluffing candidates? And actually, I want to check this idea because maybe I'm wrong about the King X advantage. And I'm just like making all this stuff up on the fly. It's possible that we just never have a lead because let's take a look at the equity graph, okay? Oh, actually, I'm kind of wrong. Actually, we're just getting torched on this river. When we go with the check call on the turn, yeah, our opponent has like way more King X. So I made a mistake. Now, the mistake I made, I want to take a look at what his reopening strategy is on the turn, because it might just be much wider. So he has a lot more King X than I understood in his reopening strategy, because his range is actually quite strong, but he wants to be able to deny equity and kind of push his advantage, but this sizing basically makes a bunch of sense. Okay, so everything I said is wrong. But not completely wrong. The theory, the backbone was wrong, but understanding the ranges was kind of I misunderstood the ranges. Anyway, so we're going to the turn, and then we're going to the river. Now we have a bluff catcher, so we're trying to make his bluffs indifferent, right? Now, when we hold a 9, we can say, oh, are we blocking some bluffs? Could he be bluffing with a 9? Okay, maybe blah blah blah. But the main point is that we're trying to make his hands indifferent between bluffing and not, because we have a bunch of medium strength hands that want to show down. And he has a bunch of hands that are strong, like King X, that want to be putting money in with an advantage. Now, he says that he has so many nuts compared to us that he's able to use a very large sizing. Imagine that we only have a little bit of nuts here and he has a shit ton of nuts. Well, mathematically, it makes more sense to use a larger sizing, because when you put money in, even if we say he bets pot, now let's say we fold half of the time, now our opponent, if he's getting called and he has a shit ton of equity because he has 100% equity, but we're still having to call a bunch of weaker hands, that might make more money. But imagine if we have a lot of good hands ourselves, maybe he wants to bet smaller because of the fact that he's going to get called by a weaker range, because we are defending a range based on his bet sizing and making his bluffs indifferent. Otherwise, he could just trick us. Whenever he has a weak hand, he would just go mass him and get us to overfold, and vice versa, blah, blah, blah. This is kind of poker theory. So this hand is not going to be amazing to call. Apparently it's actually really good to call. So I'm actually making another mistake in this situation. Holy shit. And maybe something like pocket fives or like some of these lower hands are blocking more of his bluffs, because a fair amount of his bluffing region at this point is going to be these lower pocket pairs. I just thought that we have so many straights and we have so many two pairs, and these are more efficient because they're blocking. Like if you have a hand like ace 10 here, or a hand like ace jack, or a hand like queen jack, or jack 10, those are blocking more of his Broadway king X. So I kind of thought that the 9 was a bit shitty, because even this particular 9, like 9 of hearts, if he had a hand like king 9 of hearts, he would be betting on the flop a lot. I made a mistake here. I basically misunderstood. Again, no limit hold'em, you're making a lot of mistakes. You're not like, oh my god, I messed up, I'm so bad. But you have to check if your logic was actually correct. And what did we get wrong here? Right? We kind of misunderstood the value of having a 9 here and sort of what he's actually doing with this range. And the value of having like weaker or like lower cards is really, really shitty. I very much misunderstood the situation, which is actually kind of surprising to me, because I didn't think that ace-9 would call much at all. Apparently most of it is folding, but then is specifically the ace of hearts is going to be, or the 9 of hearts is going to be doing better. I'm going to think a little bit about this. Okay, I think I figured out what was happening, because I started looking at the betting range. I was very confused and I made more mistakes here. But essentially our opponent is going to have more bluffs from a hand like 9 of spade, 9 of diamond, 9 of club, meaning that, and we can see how that's the case, right? Because basically a lot of hands like queen 9 are going to be bluffing the river, okay? Now, or, you know, something, there's some other hands that would be bluffing the river, like jack 9, this kind of stuff. But the thing is that the jack of hearts is out there and the queen of hearts is out there. So he can't be bluffing a hand like queen 9 of hearts or jack 9 of hearts. Meaning that when we hold specifically this ace 9, then we are actually unblocking his bluffs. I didn't think about it in that kind of detail. So it's not like a massive, like, again, we're seeing like the big picture and we're understanding that. But then there are these micro details where you just keep getting deeper and deeper and you might miss it. And that's kind of what's happening, because you can see that the EV on calling a normal hand like ace 9, I haven't checked it, but it's not doing very well, but it's kind of close to, you know, not amazing. But then you can see that it's very slightly better. Really, this is kind of inconsequential, but you can see that it's a better strategy to be calling this particular 9 of heart. I didn't even think about that, so that's pretty cool. Anyways, we're at 13, now we're at 14 minutes. I kind of want to click more hands, but then I still wanted to limit these videos to this. So we're going to make another part, and yeah guys, thank you for joining. I love you all, and we will see you next time.